Have you ever felt like your life was one step away from falling apart? Like everything you've worked so hard to build could be swept away in an instant. I was asking myself that exact question as I stared at the glowing screen of my phone, my heart pounding in disbelief. There it was, a notification from my credit monitoring app that would change everything. $500,000 mortgage. In my name. I clicked open the app, my hands trembling. The mortgage, listed with my full name, was a loan I hadn't taken out. The numbers didn't add up. The address? Not one I recognized. The bank? A lender I'd never even heard of. I felt the blood drain from my face as panic set in. A part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake, that maybe the app had glitched. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a sharp chill creeping down my spine. This was real. This was happening. How? How could this happen to me? I slammed my phone down on the kitchen counter and paced back and forth, trying to collect my thoughts. My mind raced. This couldn't be a random error. Someone somewhere had used my name to secure a $500,000 loan. They had my social security number, my address, everything. But who would do this? And why? I was always careful about my personal information. I had a decent credit score, a steady job in marketing, and a few close friends. Nothing in my life suggested I would ever be the victim of identity theft, let alone something this extreme. But the facts were staring me in the face. I had no mortgage, yet here it was, my name, attached to a loan that could ruin everything I'd worked for. A loan I had no idea about. Maybe this is just a mistake, I whispered to myself, the words barely making it past my lips. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The weight of reality was beginning to sink in, and it felt like I was about to drown. I grabbed my phone again, dialing the bank's customer service line, my fingers shaking as I punched in the numbers. It rang 3 times before a polite voice answered. "Thank you for calling, bank name. How may I assist you today?" I could barely speak at first. Yeah, hi, I just saw something on my credit report. There's a mortgage listed under my name, but I never applied for it. Can you help me understand what's going on?" The voice on the other end paused. "Let me check that for you. Can you verify your name and social security number, please?" I gave the information, trying to keep my voice steady, but the moment she confirmed that the loan was indeed under my name, everything inside me crumbled. This was no clerical error. This was something far worse. It seems that a loan for $500,000 was approved and processed with your information. "Let me transfer you to the fraud department for further investigation," the voice said. The words were mechanical, distant, as though it was just another case to her. But to me, it was my life falling apart. I was transferred, the minutes ticking by like hours, until finally, I was connected to someone who might be able to help. The conversation was long, frustrating, and left me more confused than before. The fraud department couldn't tell me much over the phone, other than the fact that someone had used my identity to secure the loan. But they couldn't tell me who, or why, or how. I felt like I was in a nightmare. "Do you have any idea who could have done this?" The agent asked, her voice tinged with sympathy. No, I don't," I stammered. I didn't want to admit it to her, but the truth was, I was scared. Who could do something like this to me? I didn't have any enemies, or at least I didn't think I did. After what felt like an eternity, the agent told me I would need to file a formal report with the police and contact the credit bureaus to begin the process of clearing my name. It was a process that could take months. Months. How could I afford to wait that long? I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the situation settle on me. I had no idea what to do next. My first instinct was to call my boyfriend, Ethan. He had always been the calm one in our relationship, the one who helped me think through tough situations. But as I scrolled through my contacts, something held me back. I wasn't sure I wanted to burden him with this. Ethan had his own life, his own career. He had never been caught up in anything like this. And the last thing I wanted to do was worry him. Still, after a few moments of hesitation, I hit the call button and waited for him to pick up. Hey, Sophie. What's up? Ethan answered, his voice warm and reassuring. But there was a hint of concern in it too, as if he could already sense something was wrong. Ethan. I need to talk to you about something. It's bad. Really bad. There was a brief silence on the other end, and then what happened? You're scaring me. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. Someone took out a $500,000 mortgage in my name. What? His voice was full of disbelief. Are you sure? How do you know? I just checked my credit report. It's real, Ethan. It's really happening. There was another pause, longer this time. I could hear him processing the information. Then he spoke, his voice steady but laced with concern. We're going to fix this, Sophie. We'll figure it out together. Those words, simple as they were, helped calm me down, just a little. But they couldn't erase the overwhelming feeling of betrayal. Someone had stolen my identity, and I had no idea where to even begin to fix it. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let this slide. I would fight to take everything back, no matter what it took. And in that moment, as I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone in my hands, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't just going to let this ruin me. I was going to take control of my life again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? I've always been a person who values control. I like knowing that I can handle things, that I'm the one in charge of my own life. But this was something beyond my control, something that made me feel completely powerless. It wasn't always like this. Growing up, I had a sense of stability, at least for a while. My mother, Linda, was a single parent who worked long hours to provide for me. She was always strong, always kept it together, but I saw the toll it took on her. It wasn't easy being a single mom in a small town. Our family didn't have much, but we made do. What we lacked in money, we made up for in love. But life wasn't all easy, and I learned early that you couldn't rely on others to get you through. My father, Dale, had walked out when I was just a baby. Mom had told me he left because he wasn't ready to settle down. I never got to know him, but I could feel the void he left in our lives. As I got older, I started questioning the way he had left us. Why didn't he want to be a part of my life? What kind of man just walks away? It hurt more than I liked to admit. But what hurt the most was that my mom, despite everything, would still tell me that someday he'd come back. And for years, I kept hoping she was right. When I turned 18, my mother sat me down for a heart-to-heart, something I hadn't expected. She handed me a small box with an old, weathered letter inside. "Your father sent this," she said, her voice soft. "I think you should read it." I opened it slowly, and in the dim light of the living room, I read his words for the first time. "Sophie, I know I failed you and your mom. I can't take back the past, but I hope you understand that I didn't leave because of you. I made some mistakes, and I've been trying to fix them. Maybe one day we can start over. Maybe we can talk when you're ready." I read those words over and over, the mix of regret and hope in them haunting me. But what struck me most was how his words mirrored my own feelings, how we were both longing for something that had been broken long ago. My curiosity got the better of me, and I sent him a message. I wasn't expecting much, but the response came quickly. He wanted to meet. So I did. I met Dale for the first time when I was 19. The man who I'd only heard about through my mom's fragmented stories, the man who had never been there, was now sitting across from me at a small coffee shop, looking like a stranger, yet somehow still familiar. "Hey, kid," he'd said. There was a weight in his voice that made me uneasy. He seemed lost. The meeting was awkward at first. I wanted to be angry with him, wanted to ask why he wasn't there when I needed him. But part of me still wanted to connect, to see if he could be the father I'd never had. Over the course of a few weeks, we met a couple more times. There were moments where I felt like we could rebuild something, a relationship, a bond, anything. But with each passing encounter, the cracks in his character began to show. He wasn't the man I dreamed of, not by a long shot. My father had issues, addiction issues, money problems, and a pattern of never following through. Every time I tried to talk to him about the future, he would dodge it, change the subject, or make promises that were never kept. I learned that he had always struggled with money. He would often talk about big plans to get rich, but they always fell through. I began to see that his issues weren't just with me, they were with everyone. He was constantly running from something, from himself. And eventually, I started to pull away. I couldn't keep investing in someone who wasn't ready to invest in me. By the time I was 21, I made the decision to stop trying. I cut off all contact with Dale. It wasn't easy. Part of me still yearned for the father I'd never had, but I needed to protect myself. I couldn't afford to have someone who could tear apart my world so easily back in my life. But things with my mother, Linda, remained strong. We were a team, always had been. I trusted her with everything, and despite everything that happened with Dale, she never stopped believing in him. She would tell me that people could change, that I needed to keep the door open in case one day he came back for real. I never listened. I built my life. I went to college, found a stable job in marketing, and started making a name for myself. My career was on track, and I had a great group of friends who supported me through it all. I even met Ethan, who quickly became my rock. He was kind, grounded, and shared my love for adventure. We'd been dating for almost 2 years now, and I truly believed he was the person I could build a future with. He was everything I wanted in a partner. Reliable, loving, and patient with me, especially when I had my moments of doubt. And yet, deep down, I knew that something from my past, something unresolved, was still looming over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that my father's shadow would always be there, hovering in the background. Even though I tried to move on, it felt like his absence had left a permanent scar on my ability to trust people. Trusting Ethan had been hard at first, but with time, he'd proven that I could rely on him. That made me feel safe, at least for a while. But as much as I thought I had control, my past had a way of sneaking up on me. And now, as I looked at the $500,000 mortgage in my name, I realized just how fragile everything was. What had my father been doing while I was building my life? What had he been hiding from me? I couldn't help but wonder if this was his doing. The last time I'd seen him, he'd promised he was trying to get back on track, but had he really? As much as I hated to admit it, I was starting to suspect that my father was more involved in this than I had ever imagined. But why? And how? Those were the questions that would drive me into the storm that was about to change my life forever. The days that followed felt like a blur. After discovering the $500,000 mortgage in my name, I was thrust into a whirlwind of phone calls, emails, and endless paperwork. Every part of me wanted to scream in frustration, but I had to stay calm. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. Not when I was trying to piece my life back together. I began by filing a police report. The officer who took my statement looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and professionalism. He explained that this kind of identity theft was becoming more common, but the complexity of someone taking out such a large mortgage in my name made it far more difficult to trace. I was also instructed to contact the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Each of them advised me to place a fraud alert on my credit file and requested documentation to confirm that the mortgage wasn't mine. It felt like a never-ending game of phone tag and paperwork. The most frustrating part was that I couldn't get any answers about who was behind this. I thought about calling Ethan several times during the process, but something inside me told me to wait. He was already stressed with his own work, and I didn't want to burden him with the heavy weight of this situation. I kept telling myself I could handle it on my own. After all, I always had. But there was something gnawing at the back of my mind. A suspicion. A growing feeling that this wasn't some random act of fraud. No, this felt personal. And as much as I wanted to avoid it, I couldn't ignore the fact that my father's name kept popping up in my head. Maybe it was because I'd cut ties with him years ago, or maybe it was because I was desperate for answers, but I began to entertain the possibility that he was behind this. The more I thought about it, the more pieces of the puzzle seemed to align. I remembered the last time I'd seen Dale. He had been talking about getting back on track, but I knew he had always struggled with money. The fact that the mortgage was taken out in my name and tied to a bank I'd never used didn't make sense unless someone had access to all my personal information. Someone who knew me well enough to get past the hurdles of a bank's verification process. Someone like him. But it didn't make sense. How could he possibly have gotten my information? I had kept my life private, my social security number was carefully guarded, and I had always been cautious with sharing personal details. The more I turned it over in my head, the more unsettling it became. On the third day of dealing with this nightmare, I received a call from the fraud department at the bank. "Sophie, we've managed to trace some of the activity on the loan," the representative said. Her voice was calm, professional, but there was an underlying urgency in her tone. "It seems that the mortgage was opened online, and there was some suspicious activity from an IP address linked to your father." My stomach dropped. I felt the blood drain from my face, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. I wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't a coincidence. "How do you know it was him?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We have tracking data from the application process. It seems he used a device that was linked to his name. It's possible he got access to your personal information through that device." The words hit me like a brick to the chest. My father had been the one who opened the mortgage in my name. I was certain of it now. But why? "Are you saying my father took out a $500,000 mortgage in my name?" I asked, still struggling to process the reality of the situation. "That's correct," the representative confirmed. "We're investigating further, but it seems likely that he used your personal details to secure the loan." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I was trying to hold myself together, but the weight of the realization was crushing. My father had betrayed me not just emotionally, but financially. And what did this mean for me? Was I now legally responsible for this debt? Was my credit ruined for good? I sat there, paralyzed by the enormity of it all. For the first time since this had all started, I felt completely helpless. That evening, I called Ethan. I had kept him in the dark about everything up until now, but I could no longer keep it from him. It wasn't fair to him. He deserved to know the truth, even if it made things more complicated. "Sophie, what's going on?" Ethan asked when I told him everything. I could hear the concern in his voice, and it almost broke me. I had tried so hard to shield him from this chaos, but now I was dragging him into it whether I liked it or not. "Ethan, I think it's my father. I think he's the one who took out the loan in my name." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, finally, Ethan spoke. "This doesn't make sense. Why would your father do this?" "I thought you said you cut him out of your life." "I did. I haven't seen him in years, but it's all I can think about, Ethan. The bank has evidence linking him to the application. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this." Ethan was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that made me pause. "Sophie, no matter what happens, we'll face this together. I don't know what your dad is up to, but I'm here. We'll get through it." Those words meant more than he could ever know. They gave me the courage I needed to move forward. But the fear didn't go away. It gnawed at me constantly. What if my father was behind this not just to hurt me, but because he needed something from me? Was he trying to manipulate me? Was he trying to drag me back into his mess? I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that something much darker was at play. The next day, I decided to take a step I had been dreading, calling my father. I needed answers. I needed to confront him, even if it meant reopening old wounds. Even if it meant facing the one person I had sworn to never speak to again. But before I could dial his number, I received a strange email. It was from a lawyer's office, a name I didn't recognize. And the subject line made my heart stop. "Urgent. Legal action regarding loan in your name." My pulse quickened. I opened the email and my eyes scanned the words. The message was clear. I was being sued. And it wasn't just a small claim. This was serious. The bank had already filed a lawsuit against me, and I had to respond within days, or I could face severe legal consequences. I froze. My life had just taken a turn into uncharted waters. The days after receiving that email felt like a storm had descended upon my life. Each moment I spent in the chaos of the mortgage scam felt like I was sinking deeper into a world that was completely out of my control. It was no longer just about the money, it was about my entire life, my identity, and the deep betrayal that had come crashing into my world. I knew I had to do something, but where to start? What steps could I take to clear my name, to take back control from whatever dark force had twisted my life into this nightmare? And what if it wasn't just about the money? What if there was more to this than I was seeing? That afternoon, after hours of frantic searching online and calling various legal help centers, I sat down with a lawyer. Her name was Rachel Bennett, and she specialized in cases of identity theft. I'd been referred to her by a friend of a friend, someone who'd been in a similar situation and had managed to find a way out. Rachel had a calm, reassuring presence, but there was no mistaking the urgency in her voice when she spoke. "This is a mess, Sophie," she said as she sat across from me, reviewing the email from the bank. "The fact that your father is involved complicates things. It's not just about fraud anymore. It's about intent. If he intentionally used your information for financial gain, that could be considered more than just identity theft. It might be a case of financial manipulation." I swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in my throat. But why would he do this? I don't understand. He's never been financially stable, but this is next level. Is he trying to use me? Trying to get me caught up in his mess? I had so many questions and I needed answers. Rachel leaned back in her chair, thinking. "There's no easy answer, Sophie. But I'll tell you this. You need to act fast. The bank is already suing you. They're holding you responsible for the mortgage until we can prove otherwise. I suggest we challenge the loan immediately, and we start by getting a hold of any documentation that links your father to this. We'll need to get a statement from the bank and also track down any communications your father might have made in the process." I felt overwhelmed, but I knew Rachel was right. The longer I waited, the deeper I would sink. I couldn't afford to let this hang over me. So, we set up a plan. Rachel would file the necessary paperwork to contest the mortgage, while I would gather everything I could about my father and his whereabouts. I felt a mix of fear and determination as we began the uphill climb. But that night, I received a call that would alter the course of everything. It was from Ethan. "Hey, Sophie, I think you need to hear this. I just got off the phone with my brother, and you're not going to believe this," Ethan said, his voice strained with emotion. "Sophie, my brother works in banking, and he's telling me that there's a name that keeps coming up on the documents you've been sent. That name is Dale, your dad. But there's more. It looks like he may have used someone else's name to help secure the loan." My heart dropped. I knew what Ethan was implying. Dale wasn't just using my name. He was pulling strings behind the scenes. He had a whole network, people helping him make this fraud happen. Was he using me as a pawn in some bigger game? I didn't know. But everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. Ethan continued, his words becoming more urgent. "Sophie, this is serious. I think your dad may be in deeper than we realize. He could be involved in something criminal. He's not just causing you problems, he might be involved in a syndicate. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, but I think we need to confront him. You have to take this head on." The words hit me like a freight train. I had spent so much of my life running away from my father, cutting him out of my life completely, and now he was dragging me back in whether I liked it or not. "Ethan, I can't," I whispered, choking back tears. "I can't face him. I can't confront the man who's destroyed everything I've worked for. He's not the person I thought he was." "I know. But you don't have a choice now, Sophie. We have to find out exactly what he's done, and you need to hold him accountable." I paused, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. I had thought the worst was over. I thought I could manage it on my own. But it was clear now that I couldn't do this alone, not anymore. The following day, Ethan and I decided to take action. We would track down my father. We would confront him, get the answers we needed, and force him to take responsibility for the mess he had created. But as I was making preparations to leave, I received another shocking piece of information. A letter, written in my father's handwriting, arrived in the mail. I opened it slowly, my heart racing in my chest. The letter read, "Sophie, I know this is hard for you to understand, but there's more to the mortgage than you know. I wasn't trying to hurt you, but I had no other choice. If you want to know the truth, you'll have to meet me. There are things that are bigger than both of us at play. Come alone, and I'll explain everything. Dale." I stood there for a long time, staring at the letter in disbelief. What could he possibly mean? What could be more bigger than both of us? Was this some sort of trap? Or was he genuinely trying to reach out? But a part of me already knew the answer. I had to go. I had to find out everything, no matter the cost. I turned to Ethan, who was standing in the doorway, his expression tense. "I'm going to meet him," I said quietly. "I have to know what's going on. This is bigger than me. Bigger than all of us." Ethan's eyes softened with concern, but he didn't try to stop me. "Just promise me you'll be careful. We'll figure this out together, no matter what happens." I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination welling up inside me. The storm was far from over. It was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The day of the meeting arrived, and the tension in my chest felt unbearable. I had spent hours wondering if I was making the right decision. Was I walking into a trap? Was this my father's last attempt to manipulate me, to pull me back into his world of lies and deceit? Or was this truly an opportunity to uncover the truth that had been hidden from me for so long? I stood in front of the old, rundown diner where my father had asked me to meet him. The weather matched the mood. Gray clouds loomed overhead, and a chill cut through the air, biting at my skin. The diner itself seemed frozen in time. Its cracked windows and faded sign reflected the kind of place I'd always imagined my father would show up in. A place where the past never really left. My hands were shaking as I pushed open the door. The bell above the door jingled, signaling my entrance. The smell of stale coffee and greasy food hit me instantly, and the flickering fluorescent lights overhead added to the eerie atmosphere. There, at a table in the corner, sat Dale, my father. He looked the same, yet different, older, more worn down by the years of bad decisions and the weight of the life he had chosen. His face was covered with a thin layer of stubble, and his clothes, a tattered jacket and a faded plaid shirt, did nothing to hide the years of hardship etched into his features. He didn't even look up when I approached. He was staring down at a cup of coffee, swirling it absent-mindedly. For a moment, I stood there, not knowing whether to speak or to leave. I had so many questions, but none of them seemed to make sense. All I could do was breathe, deeply, slowly, trying to calm the storm that was raging inside me. Finally, he looked up, his eyes cold but tired, as if he had seen too much and was too weary to feel anything anymore. "Sophie," he said, his voice gravelly. "I knew you'd come." I didn't sit down immediately. I stood there, arms crossed, my mind racing. "Why, Dad? Why did you do this? You took out a mortgage in my name, and now I'm being sued for $500,000. What could possibly be worth all of this? What do you want from me?" He sighed deeply and set the coffee cup down. "I never wanted this to happen, Sophie. But there are things you don't know about. Things I never told you." I waited for him to continue, but he remained silent, his eyes looking away from mine. It was as if he couldn't bear to meet my gaze. "Dad, I don't have time for this. Just tell me the truth. What's going on?" His face tightened as if I'd struck him, but after a long pause, he finally spoke. I got into debt. Not just a little debt. A lot of it. The kind of debt that takes everything from you. Your mother left, and I couldn't keep up. I needed a way out, and the only way I could think of was using you. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything. My whole life, I had told myself that I had to cut ties with him to protect myself from his bad decisions. And now, here he was, admitting that he had manipulated me, used me as a pawn in his financial games. I didn't want to do it, he continued, his voice breaking. But I had no choice. The people I owed, they don't forgive, Sophie. They don't care who they hurt. I tried to get a loan, but my name was ruined. So, I took yours. I couldn't speak. I wanted to scream at him, tell him he had ruined my life. But instead, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Here he was, still the same broken man I remembered, still trying to justify the pain he had caused. He was always looking for a way out, never facing up to the consequences of his actions. You never thought of me, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. You never thought about how your choices would destroy me. How could you do this, Dad? After everything you've already done? He seemed to shrink in front of me, his shoulders slumping as he avoided my gaze. I never wanted you to get hurt, Sophie. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could get you the money, make it right again. But I couldn't. And now here we are. I felt my anger rising again, my frustration overwhelming me. But there was something else, too, a deep sadness. A loss that was almost too much to bear. This wasn't just about the mortgage. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the years I had spent running from a man who, deep down, had always been broken. And I couldn't fix him. I couldn't save him. Tears filled my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away, refusing to let him see my weakness. You always said you wanted the best for me. But this isn't love, Dad. This is betrayal. His face softened for a moment, his eyes filled with regret. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sophie. I stood there, the weight of his words sinking in. Part of me wanted to forgive him, wanted to believe that he could change. But the other part of me, the part that had spent years protecting myself from him, couldn't let go of the truth. My father had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice steady despite the pain. But I'll fix this. I'll make sure this loan isn't my responsibility. You've done enough damage. He nodded silently, looking defeated. I never meant to drag you into this. But I'm not going to fight you. You're right, Sophie. It's not your problem anymore. I turned to leave, but before I walked out the door, I stopped and looked back at him one last time. You're on your own now, Dad. I can't keep saving you. With that, I walked out of the diner, my heart heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. I had confronted my father, but the truth hadn't set me free. It had only given me more questions. But one thing was clear. I was done being a pawn in his games. It was time to take back control of my life. The day after meeting my father felt like a strange kind of clarity had settled over me. It wasn't relief, nor was it peace, it was something else entirely. I was no longer running from the past. I had confronted it, and now it was time to take control of what came next. The feeling of betrayal still lingered, but it was tempered by a cold, hard determination. I stood in front of my apartment window, gazing out at the city below. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the skyline, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were elsewhere, swirling around the tangled mess of my life. The mortgage, the lies, the betrayal, and my father, who had once again proven that his instability wasn't just his own to bear. It was mine too. The next steps were clear. I had to fight the mortgage, clear my name, and, most importantly, learn how to live without the fear of what my father's actions might bring next. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But it was necessary. I picked up the phone and dialed Rachel. The sound of the ringing echoed in my ears, and I felt a sudden rush of nerves. I had to follow through on this. There was no turning back. "Hello, this is Rachel Bennett," she answered. Hi, Rachel. It's Sophie. I, I just wanted to update you on the situation. Good to hear from you, Sophie, she said, her tone calm and professional. What's the latest? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I met with my father. He admitted to taking out the mortgage in my name, but he claims it was out of desperation. He says he was trying to fix his financial troubles, but he didn't mean to drag me into it. I'm done trying to fix him. I just want to make this right. Rachel paused for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind. Okay, that's a breakthrough. I know it's hard, but you've done the right thing by confronting him. Now, we'll take the next step legally. We'll contest the loan, and we'll also get a fraud alert on your credit report to protect you moving forward. I could feel the weight of her words, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was on solid ground again. The anxiety that had consumed me for so long began to ebb away. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't alone in this fight. We're going to take them down, Sophie, Rachel continued. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about making sure that your father's actions don't affect your future any longer. You've got the law on your side. Hearing that felt like a lifeline. I wasn't just a victim in this story. I was a survivor and a fighter. Over the next few weeks, the process moved forward. Rachel filed the necessary motions to contest the mortgage, and I worked on getting my father to cooperate. He was reluctant, of course. He didn't want to admit to the full extent of what he'd done. But slowly, I was able to get him to sign the documents that would begin to undo the mess he'd created. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when the weight of it all felt too much to bear. But every time I faltered, I reminded myself of what I had learned. My worth wasn't tied to my father's failures. I had to fight not just for my name, but for the life I wanted to build, for the future I deserved. Then, one day, I received an email from Rachel. I opened it with a mix of hope and trepidation. The subject line read, "Mortgage Dispute Update. Good news." I clicked it open, my heart racing. The email was short, but the message was clear. Sophie, I wanted to inform you that the bank has agreed to reverse the mortgage. After reviewing all the documentation and your father's involvement, they've decided to drop the case. The loan will no longer be under your name, and you're no longer responsible for the debt. This is a major win. Congratulations, Sophie. You did it. Best regards, Rachel Bennett. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. For the first time in months, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long had lifted. I wasn't free yet. There were still things I had to work through with my father, and the scars of his betrayal would linger for a long time. But this was a victory, and it felt like I had taken back something that had been stolen from me. I called Ethan immediately. "It's done," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. The bank dropped the case. The mortgage isn't on my name anymore. He was quiet for a moment, and then he let out a loud whoop of joy. Sophie, that's amazing. You did it. I knew you would. I couldn't have done it without you, I said, the emotion thick in my voice. Thank you for everything, for sticking by me when I felt like I was losing everything. Always, sophomore. Always. But as much as I felt victorious, I knew there was one more thing I had to do. I had to let go of the past. I had to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for letting my father drag me into his mess. I had to find peace within myself, despite everything that had happened. Over the next few days, I began the process of rebuilding not just my finances, but my heart. I spent more time with Ethan, surrounded myself with friends who supported me, and started to let go of the toxic people and relationships that had weighed me down. It was time to move forward. And so, as the weeks passed, I found a new sense of purpose. I was no longer defined by the mistakes of my past. I was defined by my ability to overcome them. My father's actions, while painful, didn't control me. I did. But there was still one more step left in my journey, one final moment of closure. I drove to the diner again, but this time, I wasn't there to meet my father. I was there to leave something behind, a part of me that I would never let him take again. When I walked inside, the diner was quiet, empty. I sat at the same table where we had met, and I took out a piece of paper and wrote a short note to my father. Dad, I've forgiven you, but I'm not coming back. I've learned that I'm strong enough to stand on my own, and I don't need you to tell me what to do anymore. You will always be my father, but I can't be the person you want me to be. I have to be the person I am. Goodbye. I left the note on the table, paid for my coffee, and walked out of the diner for the last time. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to build. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Life after the mortgage scandal felt like a fresh start, but it also carried the weight of everything I had learned. I wasn't just rebuilding my finances, I was rebuilding myself. It wasn't easy, and I had moments where the past would creep back in, but I pushed through, determined to move forward. Ethan and I grew even closer during this time. We talked about everything, the future, our dreams, and our fears. He had always been my rock, but now, more than ever, I appreciated how unwavering his support had been. He didn't just stick around because I was his girlfriend. He stayed because he genuinely cared about me, my well-being, my growth, and my happiness. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Ethan turned to me with a soft smile. You know, I've been thinking, he began, his voice thoughtful. What if we take this new beginning even further? What if we moved somewhere else? Somewhere fresh. Away from all of this. I blinked, taken aback. What do you mean? I mean, what if we left the city behind? Start fresh, in a new place where no one knows us, no one knows our history. We could build a life that's completely ours, away from all the baggage we've both been carrying. I stared at him, considering the idea. The thought of leaving everything behind was terrifying, but it was also liberating. I had spent so much of my life stuck in the past, carrying the weight of my father's mistakes. The idea of a clean slate, of making a life together somewhere new, sounded perfect. It's a big step, I said slowly, but maybe it's exactly what we need. Ethan reached out and took my hand, his thumb gently brushing across my skin. We don't have to make any decisions now. But just think about it. A new place, a new start. I didn't need more time to think. I had spent too long being paralyzed by fear. If I was going to truly leave the past behind, I had to be willing to take risks. And this felt like the right one. I'm in, I said with a smile. Let's do it. And just like that, our plan was set. We decided to move to a small town a few hours outside of the city, somewhere quieter, slower, with a sense of community that I had never experienced before. I wasn't sure what awaited us, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited. Packing up my life wasn't as simple as I had imagined. There were memories in every corner of my apartment, pictures of places I had visited, old letters, and personal items that had held meaning through the years. But as I sifted through everything, I realized how much of it had been tied to a version of me I no longer recognized. The woman who had let fear and shame control her life. I was done with her. By the time we loaded the last box into the car, I was ready to leave the city behind. I closed the door to my old apartment, and for the first time, I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. I was moving forward. The drive to the small town was quiet, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Ethan and I talked about what our life might look like in this new place, how we would find new jobs, make new friends, and build a life we could be proud of. It felt like we were on the brink of something extraordinary. When we finally arrived, the town was just as charming as we had imagined. It was small, with tree-lined streets, cozy cafes, and people who actually smiled and waved as we passed by. There was a warmth to the place that made it feel like home instantly. We found an apartment, a quaint, two-bedroom unit above a bookstore. It was perfect. The kind of place where you could hear the faint sound of pages turning in the next room, where you could sip coffee on a lazy Sunday morning and read by the window. It was a far cry from the hustle and bustle of the city, and I loved it. For the first few weeks, we focused on settling in. We explored the town, met our neighbors, and even found a little coffee shop where we quickly became regulars. It was a small community, and it was easy to feel like we belonged. I could feel myself shedding the last remnants of the person I had been, the one weighed down by the mistakes of others, and embracing the person I was becoming. But there was one thing I hadn't fully addressed, the lingering feeling of betrayal from my father. I had cut him out of my life, but the emotional scars weren't as easy to erase. One evening, as Ethan and I sat on the porch, watching the stars, I brought it up. "I think I need to talk to him," I said quietly, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee mug. Ethan looked at me, his brow furrowing in concern. "Are you sure? After everything he did?" "I don't know. But I've been carrying around this resentment, and it's affecting me. I need to find closure for my own peace of mind." Ethan nodded, his hand finding mine. "You've come so far, Sophie. But whatever you decide, I'll be right here." The next day, I made the call. It was the hardest thing I had done in a long time, but I dialed his number and waited. The ringing seemed endless, but finally, he picked up. "Hello, Dad, it's Sophie." There was a long pause before he spoke. "Sophie, I didn't expect to hear from you." "I've been thinking a lot," I said, my voice steady but vulnerable. "And I want to move forward. I'm not asking for an apology, but I need you to understand something. I can't keep carrying the weight of your mistakes. It's time for me to let go of the past." He was quiet for a long time, and I wasn't sure if he was even going to respond. But when he did, his voice was softer than I expected. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me, Sophie, but I'm sorry for what I've done. I always wanted the best for you, but I went about it the wrong way. I'm glad you're doing better." "I am," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "and I'll be okay. I just had to tell you that I'm moving on. I hope you can do the same." With that, I hung up, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of closure. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. My father had always been a part of my story, but he didn't have to control the narrative anymore. I looked out the window of our new apartment, a feeling of peace settling over me. I had taken control of my life, and now I was free to write my own story. Life in our new town continued to blossom. Ethan and I were settling into our rhythm, finding joy in the simplicity of everyday moments. We'd walk to the market in the mornings, sip lattes at the local cafe, and spend our evenings on the porch, listening to the crickets and watching the stars. I had never felt so at peace in my life. The weight of the past seemed like a distant memory, something I could barely touch. But just when I thought I had finally escaped the chaos, the past found its way back into my life. It started with a phone call. I had been sitting at my desk, working on a freelance writing project I had taken up to keep myself busy when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something inside me compelled me to pick it up. "Hello, Sophie?" My stomach dropped at the sound of the voice. It was him, my father. I immediately felt the walls go up inside me, a protective instinct kicking in. "Dad, what do you want?" I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear from me right now, but I'm in a bit of trouble," he said, his voice shaky. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. "What kind of trouble?" It's hard to explain, but I need your help. I'm in some financial mess again, and I don't know where to turn." I gritted my teeth, anger and frustration boiling up inside me. I had worked so hard to get away from this. I had worked so hard to move on from the wreckage he had left behind. And yet, here he was, dragging me back into his chaos. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," I said, my voice firm, but it was hard to keep the emotion out. "I'm done, Dad. I've done enough for you. I can't keep cleaning up your messes." I was expecting him to argue, to beg, but there was a long, uncomfortable silence instead. "I understand," he said finally, his voice filled with resignation. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." I was stunned. My father had never once apologized for what he had done. He had always justified his actions, always put the blame on circumstances or other people. To hear him apologize, to actually hear the sincerity in his voice, it was strange. It felt too late. But even then, something inside me softened. Despite everything, I was still his daughter, and it still hurt to hear him in such a vulnerable state. "I'm sorry, too," I said quietly. "I'm sorry you ended up like this, but I can't help you anymore." There was another long pause before he spoke again. "Goodbye, Sophie," he said softly, and then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time after, staring at the phone in my hand. I felt a deep sadness settle over me. My father had always been a part of my life, a part of me, but I could never escape the truth of who he was. I had tried to save him. I had tried to fix things. But in the end, the only person I could truly save was myself. Ethan came into the room a few minutes later, having heard the phone conversation. He walked over to me, kneeling beside my chair, his hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I nodded, though I didn't feel okay. He called, "He's in trouble again. But I can't help him this time, Ethan. I can't keep doing this." Ethan didn't say anything at first. He just pulled me into his arms, and I buried my face in his chest, letting the tears fall. I had let myself believe that the past was behind me, but I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure if I could ever truly break free from the bond one shared with my father, no matter how much I wanted to. After a long moment, Ethan pulled back slightly, his hand tilting my chin up so I could look at him. "You've done all you could for him, Sophie. You've fought for yourself. And now, it's time to put yourself first. You can't keep carrying the weight of his choices." I sniffled, wiping my eyes. "I know, but it's hard. I keep thinking that maybe if I had done things differently, maybe I could have helped him. Maybe I could have fixed it." "You can't fix people who don't want to change, Sophie," Ethan said softly. "You've learned that the hard way. And it's time to let it go." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words sink in. It was time to let go. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me. I had worked too hard to get to this point, and I couldn't let his mistakes drag me back into the darkness. As the days went by, I took time to reflect. I spent more time with Ethan, letting his support wash over me. I also reached out to Rachel, letting her know that I was okay, that I had made peace with the situation. She was proud of me, but she also reminded me that healing took time. And healing wasn't just about my relationship with my father. It was about learning to trust myself, learning to put my needs first. I had spent so long trying to fix others, trying to please everyone around me, that I had forgotten the most important thing, my own happiness. But now I was learning. I was learning that my happiness didn't have to come at the expense of my peace. And that realization made all the difference. A few weeks later, Ethan and I decided to take a small trip to the mountains. We rented a cabin for the weekend, just to get away from everything and everyone. It was a chance for us to relax, to reconnect, and to simply enjoy being together. As we hiked through the woods, the fresh air filling my lungs, I realized how far I had come. I had once been consumed by fear, by doubt, and by the need to prove myself to others. But now I was free. I was free to live my life on my terms, without being weighed down by the mistakes of my past. And in that moment, as I stood there beside Ethan, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The serene mountain retreat had been just what we needed. After the phone call with my father, I had felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Spending the weekend in the cabin had given me the mental clarity to realize that I was in control of my life now. The past could no longer dictate my future, and I wasn't going to let it. But life, as it always does, had a way of testing my resolve. When we returned from our trip, I felt renewed, like I was ready to face whatever came my way. However, reality came crashing down quicker than I expected. It was one evening, only a few days after we got back, that I got another call, this time from my old financial advisor, Marcus. I had almost forgotten about the lingering complications from the mortgage. Marcus had helped me untangle my finances after everything went down with the fraudulent mortgage, but there were still loose ends I hadn't addressed. When I picked up the phone, his voice was calm, but I could hear the urgency in it. "Sophie, I need to talk to you about something important. It's about the mortgage," he said. "I'm afraid it's not completely cleared up yet. There are still some discrepancies in the paperwork. Someone has been using your identity to take out loans in your name. We might have missed something in the final stages." I felt my heart skip a beat. The relief I had felt from finally settling my financial issues now seemed fragile, like it was about to shatter. "What do you mean?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "What kind of discrepancies?" "It looks like there are more transactions we didn't catch. And there's a chance the fraudsters are still trying to access your accounts." "This isn't over, Sophie." I could hear the words, but they didn't quite register. My body was frozen, my mind reeling. How could this be happening again? After everything I'd been through, I thought I was finally free. "You have to fix this," I said, the words coming out sharper than I meant. "I can't go through this again, Marcus. I've already lost so much." "I understand," he said, his voice softening. "We'll do everything we can to make it right. But I need you to meet with me. There's a lot we need to go over. And it's urgent." The meeting was set for the next day, but that night, I could hardly sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of the forged documents flashed before me. The thought of someone still using my name, my identity, to make deals and take loans felt like a violation, a deep betrayal of the trust one had fought so hard to rebuild. Ethan, sensing my distress, sat beside me that night, his hand gently rubbing my back. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm and steady. "We'll face this together. You don't have to go through it alone." But the truth was, as much as I appreciated his support, I knew this was something I had to deal with on my own. It was my name, my identity, and my future at stake. Ethan had been there through every twist and turn, but I had to take charge of my own life. No one else could carry this burden for me. The next morning, I met Marcus at his office, a sleek glass building that seemed too impersonal for the gravity of the conversation we were about to have. When I walked into his office, he stood up, his expression serious. "I'm sorry, Sophie," he began. "We missed something. There's a pattern here that suggests this is bigger than we thought." I sat down, my hands trembling. "What kind of pattern?" "It looks like the fraudsters aren't just taking out loans in your name. They're building a whole new identity around you. They've managed to get several credit lines approved, and the worst part is, they've been paying off the loans consistently. It's as if they've been running a completely different life using your information." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. How is this even possible? How did they get away with it? The best guess is they used the chaos of your old mortgage situation as cover. They had access to a lot of your personal details. But the worst part is, we don't know who's behind it yet. Whoever they are, they've been careful. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. This was my worst fear, that someone had taken my identity and built a life off it while I was trying to rebuild mine. "But I've already gone through everything with you," I said, my voice tight. "How could we have missed it? We were focused on the initial loans and didn't dig deep enough. The fraud wasn't as obvious as we thought. The loans they took out seem legitimate on the surface. It's only when we went back and started looking at all the details that we began to see the pattern." I closed my eyes, trying to process everything. It felt like a nightmare that had no end. I had fought so hard to get out of the mess my father had left behind, and now this new betrayal, from someone I didn't even know, felt like a gut punch. "I need you to fix this, Marcus," I said, my voice firm despite the fear clawing at me. "I don't care what it takes. I can't live like this anymore." "We're going to do everything we can, Sophie," Marcus promised. "I'll personally handle it. I'll contact the authorities, and we'll start the investigation. But it will take time." I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. It was all out of my control now. I had done everything I could to keep my finances in check, to move forward, but there were forces beyond me trying to drag me back. As I left Marcus's office that day, The weight of everything settled back onto my shoulders. I thought I was free. I thought the past was finally behind me, but it wasn't. This was another test. Another obstacle I had to face on my journey. And as much as I hated it, I knew I had no choice but to fight again. Ethan was waiting for me outside the building, his expression softening when he saw the look on my face. "I'll get through this," I said, trying to sound confident, though my voice betrayed me. He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he simply pulled me into his arms and held me there. No words were needed. In that moment, I knew that with him by my side, I could face anything. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a fight for my financial security. It was a fight for my freedom. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone steal that from me. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and long nights filled with paperwork. Every step forward seemed to be met with 2 steps back. Despite the growing tension, I felt a sense of clarity in the chaos. This was the final battle, the one that would define the rest of my life. Ethan and I had grown even closer through this ordeal. Every evening, as the stress of the day weighed heavily on me, he would remind me that I was not alone in this fight. His unwavering support became my anchor, even when the storm around us seemed relentless. One evening, as we sat on the porch of our home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I turned to Ethan. I never thought it would be like this. I thought after everything, the worst was behind me. Ethan reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "I know, but sometimes the hardest battles come when we least expect them. But remember, Sophie, you've already survived so much. You've faced things most people would crumble under. You're stronger than you think." I took a deep breath, taking in his words. The journey to this point had been long and exhausting. There had been moments when I felt like giving up, but every time I wanted to let go, Ethan was there, reminding me that I had the strength to carry on. He was my constant, my reminder that no matter how many setbacks life threw my way, I could keep going. The final piece of the puzzle came a week later when Marcus called with an update. "I've got good news," Marcus said, his voice crackling through the phone. "We've tracked down the perpetrators behind the fraudulent loans. It wasn't just one person, it was a whole network working together. We've gathered enough evidence to bring them down." My heart skipped a beat. After months of uncertainty, the moment I had been waiting for had arrived. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice steady but my mind racing. "It's still being investigated, but what we know for sure is that they've been operating under multiple fake identities. One of them was using your name to take out loans in different states. But the good news is that we've been able to freeze their accounts and stop them from accessing your information any further." I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. "So, it's really over?" "It's not entirely over yet," Marcus cautioned. "The authorities are handling the legal side of things now. But as far as your name and your accounts are concerned, you're in the clear. The fraud is stopped." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was over. After all the sleepless nights, the stress, the fear, it was finally over. My identity was no longer being used by strangers, and I had regained control over my life. But even as the relief washed over me, I knew the emotional toll would take longer to heal. The scars from the past wouldn't disappear overnight, but I had survived. And that meant everything. "I can't believe it," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "After everything, it's finally done." "You did it, Sophie," Marcus said, his tone warm. "You're free." As I hung up the phone, I felt a flood of emotions I couldn't quite name. There was relief, yes, but also a profound sadness. For all the victories I had won, for all the progress I had made, there would always be a part of me that would carry the weight of the past. The fight had changed me, deepened me in ways I didn't expect. But that was part of the journey, learning to accept the past and use it as fuel for the future. Ethan came in as I sat on the couch, still processing the news. He could tell by the look on my face that something had changed. "It's over," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you, Sophie. You've been through hell, and you came out stronger than before. I leaned into him, grateful for his presence, for his unwavering belief in me. I couldn't have done it without you, I admitted. You've been my rock. When I felt like I was drowning, you pulled me back to the surface. You've always had the strength inside you, Sophie, he said softly. I just reminded you of it when you needed to hear it the most. The doorbell rang, and we both looked toward the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, I was surprised to find a package waiting for me on the doorstep. I bent down and picked it up, recognizing the familiar logo on the box. It was from the bank. My heart sank as I tore it open, not sure what I was about to find. But as I unfolded the letter inside, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. It was a formal letter from the bank confirming that the fraudulent mortgage was fully cleared from my name and that I had no further liabilities attached to it. The debts had been erased, and all records of the fraudulent transactions were officially nullified. I exhaled sharply, the weight lifting off my chest. This was the final piece I needed. I could finally move forward without fear of the past following me. I turned to Ethan, a smile spreading across my face. It's really over. Ethan stood up and pulled me into a tight embrace, lifting me off the ground. You did it, Sophie. You took back everything that was stolen from you. And now, you're free. The truth of his words settled in as I wrapped my arms around him. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I had fought so hard to reach. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to shape. As I looked out the window toward the horizon, the sun rising on a new day, I realized that everything I had been through had led me here, to this moment of peace, of freedom, of hope. The battle had been long, but it had taught me more than I ever expected. It had shown me that no matter what life threw at me, I was capable of facing it head-on. It had shown me the strength I never knew I had. And most importantly, it had shown me that I was worthy of the peace I had found. The road ahead wasn't going to be perfect, and I knew there would be more challenges. But I was ready. I was ready to live the life I had fought for. And this time, it would be on my terms. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?